Thank you, Cindy. Jacqueline, please.
Hello. I would like, first of all, to thank WLP for putting together this wonderful session and to express that I'm very happy to be here at the New School for Social Research. And I thought that instead of going directly into Brazil, I would try to frame and conceptualize a little bit about violence against women. Starting to say that the social perception, as well as the institutional recognition that certain behavior, certain customs, attitudes, laws, values towards women are violent and express social relations permeated by violence is historical. And it depends ultimately upon the gender power relations which predominate in a given society. So each society has a dominant conception of violence against women, which is expressed in laws, in practices. But that does not mean that it is the only conception. It does not mean that it is static. There is room there for change, and there is room for political action. That was bring us here. The structural characteristics of a society, the cultural patterns, political and economic junctures, the dynamic of various actors as government, religious institutions, non-governmental organizations, universities, etc., private sector, the media, they are the players in the political arena. And they have an effect on the definition of violence against women in a given time, in a given society. What I want to say is that this idea of order and disorder, crime and punishment, they are not absolute truth. They are dynamic concepts and they can change through time. Also, there is frequently a distance between what is perceived as violent. A murder is usually, homicide is usually perceived as a violent act in every society. What is considered as a crime and what is punished as such. There's not a juxtaposition. And this is very clear in the case, for instance, of honor killing. This is very clear in the case of an argument that was used, but fortunately women's political action, it's less and less, and almost not used anymore, but was used in Brazil, which was the argument of the legitimate defense of honor in cases, for instance, of husbands that would murder a wife in suspicion of infidelity, whatever. So what I want to say is that this distance between what a society recognizes as a violent behavior and what a society punishes and criminalizes as such is also political and depends on political action to be both expanded in terms of what is recognized and shorten the distance between crime and punishment. For many centuries throughout the world, violence against women did not exist as a social and political issue because women were, and still is in many places of the world, a second-class citizen. And this second-class citizenship, it's within the family, in the labor market, in an absence from political spheres, less presence in the educational system. Anyway, laws, policies, customs, values, they vary among different settings, but throughout the history of humanity, we have been second-class citizens. Thus, violence against us has been a second-class issue in most societies, taking different emphases. We talk about emphasis here. We all know that violence against women is pervasive, that it takes very different forms, that the visibility is the result of a political struggle, and that this political struggle has, as the main actor, women's movements. And there has been progress. There has been progress. It was mentioned here, the Beijing conference, and women's rights are human rights. I want to go back to 1993, though, to the Vienna Conference on Human Rights, where, due to women's political action and international political action, for the first time, the human rights grammatic included violence against women as a human rights violation. And this meant a paradigmatic shift in the concept of human rights that had always to do with the responsibilities of the state towards the individual, not considering what happened within the walls of the house or between private individuals. So this great major change that led also to Beijing's affirmation that women's rights are human. I mean, we need to affirm that women's rights are human rights. Can you see the absurd of that? It is because the concept of human rights has been built out historically where some categories are less human than others. Because the only prerequisite to be entitled to human rights is belong to the human species. But what we see throughout history is not only women, but due to race, to ethnicity, to many other factors, to poverty, some are more human than others. So finally, yesterday, in 1995, it was said women's rights are human rights. So I just bring these aspects to show how important it is, the coalition, how important it is, the articulation, how important it is, the political action that has contributed to endorse the new concept of violence against women based on the universality, the indivisibility, and the inalienability of the human rights. And we cannot understand these political victories outside of the context of women's rights advocates, both national and internationally. I'm sorry. I will just, I have a few minutes. I want to mention that my organization, CEPIA, has done a study analyzing violence against women in 8 countries: Brazil, China, Egypt, India, Palestine, Russia, South Africa, and the USA. And we have observed how violence against women is at the same time particular and universal. Particular and universal on its manifestations, but also on the responses of the women on the ground. Because we could see that there was some homogeneity on what women's groups were doing. Many of the things that Cindy has just mentioned, she's doing in Nigeria, things that Asma is doing in Jordan, we are doing in Brazil, in different contexts. And it called our attention the fact that one of the main things is collect data. Because as violence against women is invisible, it is necessary to make it visible, to collect data, to influence national census bureaus, etc. So I finished saying that we are gathered here today to celebrate Beijing's 15 years, but we are here gathered as part of a work in progress. And I would like to recognize WLP's role in this work in progress, a very important role to put together organizations from throughout the world, to recognize each woman who is not here, who is working on their own country, locally, or doing advocacy work, also to either create new laws, create new spaces, or shorten the distance between discourse and reality. And to say that I am quite worried about what's happening at the UN right now. I am in the Brazilian delegation, And I don't see much progress over there. So there's a lot for us to do outside. Thank you.